What is Central Europe? And is it any different to Eastern Europe? Is the difference important or just another example of political correctness? This region that emerged from Russian domination is growing in its global significance. In this film, we tell you what you need to know about it. Let's start with the definition. In the broadest sense, it refers to all the post-communist countries situated in the middle of Europe. Almost all these countries have joined the EU, so it's rare to include Belarus and Ukraine, since they haven't, although we'll discuss that possibility later on. Occasionally, we also see countries included which are more historically associated with the West, such as Austria and Greece. Why is it so hard to define this area? Part of the answer is geography, part is imperial history.
We can also think of it as kind of defined by three seas, the Baltic, the Black and the Adriatic Sea. Also, it's reflected in one of the regional organizations, the Three Seas Initiative. If you look more historically, you can think of it as a region between different empires, between the German, Russian, and if we think about the southern part, let's say, of Central Europe, it would be the Ottoman, the Turkish Empire.
As these empires fell, the nations of the area between them emerged from domination.
And another important feature is that it's a region of rather small to medium nations that were struggling against the bigger empires. So the sort of post-imperial legacies, it's important here. If you look at the region 200 years ago, you wouldn't find a single independent country. You would find a region divided by the Russian, by the Prussian, later German, by the Habsburg and by the Ottoman empires.
The influence of these foreign powers can still be seen today, for example in the diversity of religion in the region, and partially also in the lack of diversity of religion.
Probably Catholicism as a dominating religion, so Western Christianity, but you have also Orthodox Christians, you have Protestants, particularly Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic. You have Jewish population. I mean, Central Europe was a region where the Jewish culture thrived. Of course, it ended up with Holocaust, but still you have important role of the Jewish heritage in the region.
Of course, the region's nations are not identified by how they were influenced by their former masters. Through these periods of subjugation, they were able to hold on to their own identities. This can be seen, for example, in the linguistic diversity.
Linguistically, it's quite diverse. You have Slavic countries, but you have also Romanian, which is a Romance language. You have Hungarian, that is not even part of the Indo-European family of languages. So probably one of the definitions of Central Europe would be that it's one of the most diverse places in the world.
Having cast off the shackles of foreign rule, it would seem these countries are natural allies. But, naturally, there have also been some historical strains between the nations.
These nations were always struggling against bigger empires, but it doesn't mean that they always lived peacefully. I mean, you have a difficult history between, let's say, Hungarians and Slovaks. You have some historical difficult history between Poles and Czechs, or let's say Serbs and Croats, etc.
They have found common cause in regional organizations. We mentioned the Three Seas Initiative, which includes 13 countries in the region. There is the Bucharest 9, which groups together the countries of NATO's eastern flank. But there are reasons why a narrower definition of Central Europe is usually preferred. The Baltic countries have links to the region, for example, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, but they are now usually put in the Nordic-Baltic space. Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Slovenia and other post-Yugoslav countries are now usually grouped as Southeastern Europe. But one group of countries is included in every definition of Central Europe and made common cause even before the demise of the Eastern Bloc. They form one of the oldest and best-known regional organizations.
One of the oldest and probably the most known is the Visegrad Group, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary, established just after 1989, the fall of communism, established actually by the people that participated in this Central European debate in late communist periods, and also the oldest format of Central European cooperation.
But since these countries lie in the heart of Europe, why were they called Eastern? This label has deep roots, stretching back to the Enlightenment, when Western travelers superficially saw it as a backwater compared to the civilized West. But this history as a hinterland continued up until Russia's grip on the region weakened in the late 20th century.
In the past, especially during the Cold War, it was often branded as Eastern Europe, to the dislike of the countries or the nations of this region. It was basically founded on the geopolitical division of Europe of that time. The West being democratic, free market, the East being communist and dominated by the Soviet Union.
Many in the region see the label of Central Europe as a sign of their liberation from their imperialist Eastern neighbor. But opposition to this term is not a new phenomenon.
This was contested in the communist period in the region. There is this famous essay by Milan Kundera, The Tragedy of Central Europe. And he argued basically that we should not treat the whole region as one, and we should not treat it as the same as Russia, basically. He was emphasizing these cultural similarities to the West.
In fact, these references to Eastern Europe no longer make sense when discussing the region. Historically, they were at a crossroads, but at present, in political terms, it is completely clear that they are part of the West, they are NATO members, and they are in the European Union. But the transition from East to West was difficult. Decades of domination by the Soviet Union played a role in the underdevelopment of the countries of the region, but liberation opened the door to rapid progress. They've worked quickly to catch up to the EU.
They started with about 30-40% of GDP per capita of the EU. Now they are at more or less 80%, with Czech Republic or Slovenia reaching the EU average.
We can mention two factors which helped this economic growth. The transfer of funds as part of cohesion policy aimed at reducing differences in development across the EU's regions, and the common agricultural policy because the region has a strong agrarian tradition. These countries also have a common stance when it comes to the balance between environmentalism and their energy needs.
They are all developing nuclear energy. They are rather in favor of kind of a fair balance between climate goals and keeping strong industrial policies.
But Russia's war in Ukraine is testing the cohesion of the region.
The disagreements became particularly visible after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Here, despite the common history, some of the countries reacted in a different way. So Hungary, from the very beginning, started to distance itself from the conflict. Other countries were very strongly supporting Ukraine. I mean, having the history of the Russian invasions, Russian occupation, and also being aware of how Russia wants to kind of recreate its sphere of dominance in the region, they very strongly supported Ukraine and started to work on improving the security and the resilience of the region. And here Hungary reacted differently. Then came the change of government in Slovakia, that also changed the approach of Bratislava towards the conflict, making it closer to the Hungarian approach because of these security differences between Poland and Hungary, to give an example.
However, it has put the region more into the spotlight of world affairs.
Well, after 2022 and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there was a lot of talk about the center of gravity in the West moving eastwards, meaning that these countries became much more important due to their role in supporting Ukraine, etc. So here I think politically the region became more visible and important. I think that Central European cooperation is important for expressing the interests of the region in the wider frames, in NATO, in the European Union.
Could other countries be aspiring to join the center?
That might also explain the popularity or a growing popularity of the concept of Central Europe in Ukraine, because many people there also try to kind of emphasize and communicate to the international audience that they are not part of Russia, they are part of a different region, and very often they employ the concept of Central Europe. And I think the concept of Central Europe became a point of reference also for Ukraine or for Ukrainians. To distinguish yourself from Russia, it is useful to show that you are part of this region that kind of successfully joined the West in the 90s, in 2000s. So, I mean, it is a religiously, culturally diverse country. So, in a way, it fits the formula of, as Kundera wrote, the maximum diversity on the minimum of territory.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, why not try the links you can see on screen now?